I want you guys to put yourselves in the mind of someone who does analytics on marketing data. So pretty common use case across our customer base. You have new data coming into the data lake in JSON format. You can imagine this is getting ingested from click streams online. So what everybody's clicking and how they're interacting with your digital marketing. And then there's a more traditional data source that contains sales data. So what everybody has purchased from your client. And the real goal here is, can you combine those two sources that have been landed in a unified data lake and be able to use those analytics to more quickly figure out, are your ads effective or not? So the role that Trifacta is going to play is allowing somebody to very quickly combine the data from these different sources in the lake, visually understand what's in the data, and be able to get it all landed into their data warehouse much more quickly so they can do analytics. So let's start with our clickstream data. So this is data that maybe has been scraped off of something like BigQuery or Instagram or Facebook and landed into HDFS. So when I open up this data, you should notice a couple things right off the bat. The first is that you're actually seeing the data. So we consider ourselves a data first platform at Trifacta. Oops, it looks like I actually opened the wrong data set, my bad. And I spotted that because I could see the data. So because we are so focused on allowing the end users to get their eyes on the data, we want to let you know exactly what's happening at every step. What should also jump out at you is the profiling information that we collect automatically. So if you're thinking in the minds of this analyst who's working with external data from different websites, they probably don't know upfront how clean or how well formatted that data is before they start working with it. And so instead of having to go in and write custom code in their language of choice to figure out, are things formatted correctly? Does everything conform to the expected data types? Trifacta does that work automatically. So if we look at this event time column, I can see very clearly that we've surfaced that there's about 4,000 records in this column that are not properly formatted date time values. So I can go a little bit deeper and understand exactly what these values are. I'm doing this just by clicking on the column. And we're now opening up a panel with even more information about what this data actually looks like. So I can see here I have a column, a set of unique values, and this red bars, or this bar of error values, is jumping out instantly. So I can click on these because this is probably part of my data quality problem. Obviously, error timed out is not a date. And by clicking on error timed out, Trifacta comes up with suggestions. And so these are different operations that Trifacta thinks I might want to apply to my data. So this is really powerful functionality. Again, if you're thinking in terms of how do I expedite this transformation process so I can do the cool analytics work much faster. And in this case, the suggestions is one way that we can help the user get things done very fast. So I'll just add this delete to my recipe. You'll see that the data updates in real time. So again, letting you see immediately exactly what this is doing to your data. Now you'll notice I still have some mismatched values. I can highlight those values and see that it looks like whatever ingestion process we use to get this data into HDFS, there's a formatting issue or inconsistency. Some of the dates spell out the word November, and some of them abbreviate that date value. So again, thinking of doing this in traditional tools, you'd probably write some regular expressions to start targeting and reformatting these different formats. In Trifacta, instead of forcing you to write regular expressions, we're going to automatically generate that cleansing step for the user. So you can see I've entered an interface that shows me the different formats present in this column. I see I've actually got 3 different date time formats. I can simply click on the date time format that I want. And you can see the suggestion that Trifacta generates if I look at my preview, is going to identify the incorrect formats and convert them into the correct date time that I chose. And I can also validate that this is going to finish cleansing this column. So if I compare the quality bars between my source column and what I'll end up with after applying this step, I can see that in my result, I don't have any mismatches anymore. Just out of curiosity, I'll show you the code that we're generating behind the scenes. So it is just a large number of regular expressions. I think, for now, this data looks good enough. If you remember from my flow, I also have this sales data. So another highly common action when you're, creating a common data model in your data warehouse is combining disparate sources. So naturally, we want to perform a join next. So I haven't talked about the toolbar at the top of the screen. This is another way to access the 200 plus functions and transformations available in Trifacta. So again, we've tried to make this very easy for an end user or somebody who's new to the tool to figure out what they're looking to do. So in this case, I can choose the join tool and just select that sales data data set that I'll be bringing in. Now, when I open up the join tool, you're going to see that we're still generating the real-time preview. So a lot of times users, they spend more time on joins than they should, just because trying to figure out the join keys and the overlap and selecting all the columns takes a little bit of time. So Trifacta will try to guess the correct join key. And we're doing this based on the amount of overlap between the data in the columns. So you can see that user ID and customer key have about a 97% overlap. In this case, this is the correct key. There's all sorts of other join options that you can configure if you're looking for that as well. I can also visually select the columns from the left and the right side of the join. In this case, I'm just going to choose everything. Once again, sort of allowing me to visually see, okay, here's what I'm getting, here's what my data is going to look like. And finally, when I click Add to Recipe, we're going to see that join step in the recipe, and I can go back and edit this at any point. And the data has updated to show both sides of that join. So now that I've brought in that second data set, I want to change the granularity or the shape of my data. So right now, this is at the order level. One row in this data set represents one order. But if I look at the sales order line column, I can see that this actually contains a nested structure where I have information about all of the products that each of these users has ordered embedded inside the data. And so again, working with JSON type structures is particularly common in Hadoop data lakes. And it's not always something that your analyst community feels like they have the ability to tackle themselves. And so we're now with Trifacta allowing these users to really make use of semi-structured data. In order to fold this into multiple rows, once again, I'm going to leverage that suggestion engine. So if I click on the column, I can see an option, flatten array values into new rows. And by looking at the preview, I can see that this is going to take all of the individual line items and produce one row for each line item and copy the other data downwards. Now what I can see from the resulting structure is I've got 13 keys that are part of the sales order lines data. If I brush over my mouse, I can see what each of these keys are. And I can just select the keys that I want to turn into columns. And you'll see Trifacta is going to automatically unfold that object or map structure. So now I can start working with the actual item level detail for this order. As a final step here, as I said, I want to make this pretty quick for a day in the life. We finished developing the recipe. The final step is to actually produce an output and write this back to the data lake or the data warehouse. As Luis asked, up until this point, all of the processing and all of the development has just been happening in my browser. If I hit run job, this is going to take my data and my recipe, compile the recipe into a Spark job, and push the execution down to the larger cluster. I can configure different locations for where I want to write that data back as well. So in the case of a Cloudera environment, I can write the data to HDFS or Hive. And when I hit run job, this is going to kick off that batch process. So at this point, hopefully you guys have seen how adding a tool like Trifacta into your accounts can help enable a wide variety of users to actually make use of the data instead of relying on a more technical team member to do that transformation work for them. So what we've seen in a lot of our accounts is that once we've deployed Trifacta, it's really helped the broader analytics or enterprise data organization actually get to that data democratization vision.